many demons had entered him, and he begged him not to command them to depart into the abyss. Now a large herd of pigs were feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him to let them enter these. So he gave them permission. And the demons came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and drowned. So once again, we see that a couple things. Number one, this is true of Satan. The demons are limited in their power. They have no power over Jesus, Son of the Most High God. And they recognize that. They recognize that He's superior to them. They want to be left alone. And they're also aware of a timeline. Put it that way, a timeline. They're supposed to be permitted to just do their thing until the time. It's not time for them to be destroyed. And which is maybe something we overlook when Jesus casts out the demons. He's not destroying them. They're cast out. They go somewhere else. And that's what happens here. They want to go into the pigs, and He allows it. So once again, Mark, or Luke rather, emphasizes the authority that the words of Jesus have. He doesn't just command illness to be gone. He doesn't command people. He commands the demonic. It's quite incredible. And so they go into the pigs, and then the demons kill the pigs. Right? They run them off a cliff, and then they go into the water. We talked about water a little bit, I think, on Sunday when we talked about Jesus calming the storm. I mean, the water is, as far as the ancients were concerned, the water is evil. It was uncontrollable, right? It's chaos, and so it should not be at all surprising that that's where they went. That's where they went. Now,
do we know what the abyss is?
The abyss. That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think the abyss could be a reference to the water. Their realm, what eventually will be their final destination. To put it that way.
Is that mentioned in Revelation for this?
I think so.
And that's what I'm thinking, that because you just said that there wasn't time. And that's what they're saying. Don't send us to the abyss now.
Mm-hmm.
They know they're going to be there.
Yeah.
And it might seem whatever. I think that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, wherever they are now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're not here now.
Mm-hmm. So, the aftermath of this is, well, first of all, let's talk about this man. So we're introduced to him, and he's unclothed, he's bound, he's in the tombs, he's engaged in self-harm, he is away from the people. After Jesus casts out the demons, how would you describe him? What's his condition?
He's normal.
He's restored. He's clothed. Isn't it interesting how Luke points that out? He's now clothed. And he's sitting at the feet of Jesus. Where do we need to be? You know, Luke is showing us where we need to be, what we need to be filling our lives with. It's whether it's the demonic or whether it's sin. When that's cast out, something has got to be filled in the void. I think there's another, I forget if it's Luke, I think it is in Luke later on, where we'll deal with the demons being cast out, and he says, hey, if they come back, you know, it's worse than the first. You've got to fill the void, and it seems to be that's what's happening. The man also, he wants to follow Jesus. He wants to follow Jesus. What's Jesus tell him?
Go home and tell others what God has done for you.
Go home and tell others what God has done for you. Okay. So Jesus has a purpose in mind for it. It wasn't what he wants initially. Now man isn't going to dispute or argue about it. But it does, I think it does show maybe in a subtle way how Jesus has a purpose for us. And he's given this man a new life, and now this is how things are going to, how his new life is going to start to shape up.
David, it made me think that he hadn't been telling people to do that. He told them, don't say something.
He tells different people different things,
Okay.
and
I thought maybe he's getting closer to.
yeah, sometimes he says don't say anything. Other times he says go back and tell them. But you're right. I mean, we usually are drawn to the instances where he says don't say anything. But at this point, everybody knows about Jesus.
And his time is short.
Yes, because we're just about to notice in chapter 9 where he turns his face toward Jerusalem. The end is coming.
Do you think this is a stretch? You mentioned, I hadn't even thought about him being closed. You know, when Adam and Eve sinned, God closed them.
Mm-hmm.
Did Jesus close them, or did he? Is there any symbolism there? I don't know. I
thought the same
time there was
thing.
in between that. Like
Pardon?
maybe, I wonder if there's a little bit of time in between that.
Probably.
You know, like he went away, collected himself, realized, okay, I'm healed now, I'm going to put some clothes on, I'm going to look like a regular human being. You know,
Yeah.
I'm thinking there was probably some time.
I would probably, and we kind of forget that when you read through this.
Yeah, it just seems like it's all like one big
bang,
lump.
bang, bang.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you get a sense of time in the fact that when the pigs go off the cliff, the herdsmen find out what's going on. They're coming back to town, but Jesus is teaching, and this man is. So there is time that has passed.
And he also says that he's now in his right mind.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, those little words sometimes we skip.
Yeah.
You know, like the prodigal son coming to his senses.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means that he's thinking right now, oh my goodness, I got to get close.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's probably embarrassed, probably humiliated that he.
Well, a couple things to think about though. This is not necessarily our definition of what Western people think is naked, which is totally completely naked, no clothes at all. This is more of a definition of naked back then, which meant he may have had some clothes on, not completely naked. So it's kind of a different way of how we look at it versus how they looked at it back then.
Yeah.
Different things. Originally Greek that way, so something to think about as well.
So, talk about the general reaction to this. The herdsmen. When people all start to put everything together, how do they react?
They ran away. And they told everybody.
They ran away and they tell everybody.
And then they asked Jesus to leave.
Why do they want him to leave?
Just wreck their income.
That's a factor.
They were afraid.
They're afraid. I've said it when we've talked about Jesus casting out demons earlier. I mean, I think this would have just scared people to death anytime they saw this kind of thing happen. And it does show another reaction. Something else to maybe that's part of the background here is the fact that you're dealing with predominantly Gentile background, and so what's their framework for understanding what's going on? It's going to be very different than the Jews. Now, the Jews, I think, were scared to death too, at different points. So what I'm saying is, they have a different perspective that they would have, how they would have, interpreted what they saw is probably different than, some of the Jews who thought this was, the greatest thing that ever happened.
They would have had a very pagan framework, especially with all the different gods they believed in, kind of controlling different parts of nature, and would have tried to associate that with what happened.
Yeah,
to make sense of it.
Yeah, and there's just, how do you explain this? Just, who knows? You just get out of here. We don't want you here. So yeah, that's another reaction that you have here developing in his ministry.
So why does Matthew 8 refer to two men, but Luke mentions one man?
Matthew 8, two men. What two?
It says, and when he came to the other side to the country of the Gadarenes, two demon dead men met him, coming out of the tomb so fierce that no one could pass that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same story, but two men in Matthew, one in Mark.
One in Mark.
Luke.
One in Mark. So Matthew is the one that's different. I'm not sure. I don't know. In terms of the accounts, Mark is the generally viewed as the earliest, and he becomes the source material for the others. And so generally, I would say, where you have parallel accounts, you go back to Mark.
Even though Matthew was a first-hand observer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which probably means that there were two, but two of the stories focus on only one of the two.
It could
Possibly,
be.
I mean,
It could be. Yeah. Anything else? All right. So next we see Jesus healing Jairus' daughter, and Jesus heals more than just her in this section, but that's what is motivating these series of events. So we see that crowds of people. In verse 40, when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they all were waiting for him. And there came a man named Jairus, a ruler of the synagogue. And falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. And of course, as a parent, you cannot help but sympathize with the man. We can understand his desperation. It is significant that he is, Luke describes him as a ruler of the synagogue. So this is not just your average Jew, average Galilean, but he's someone who has an important position in the town, and he's a man who has faith in Jesus, and that may again surprise us in terms of here's an example of a leader who will demonstrate his faith in Jesus. So he what else could a man do? It's total desperation, and Jesus is his only hope, and so that's who he's waiting. He's waiting for him to see him, to ask him. Well, then as you get it, Luke gives you a sense of the chaos of this scene. Just a big crowd of people, and everybody wants a piece of Jesus. And so this man, Jairus, gets to him, but while all of this is going on, in the middle of 42, it says, as he went, the people pressed around him. And there was a woman there who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. Though she had spent all her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. She came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, and immediately her discharge of blood ceased. And Jesus says, who was it that touched me? When all denied it, Peter said, Master, the crowd surround you and are pressing in on you. But Jesus said, someone touched me, for I perceive that power has gone out of me. When the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling, falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him, and how she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. So this woman, it's another desperate situation. Sick, dying people are desperate. And, Luke, again, gives us some details that she had this discharge of blood for 12 years, and she had spent all of her money. Now, again, as a preacher, I say there's a lot of symbolism. There's some good theology wrapped up in this text. That's how we are in sin. When we're in sin, life is just going out of us. Life is being drained out of us. And no matter what we do to heal ourselves, nothing works. You can spend all your money trying to fix your life, and it's not going to work. You need Jesus to do that. And so that's what this woman does. And a large group of people, you could imagine people bumping into him all over the place. And so this woman touches, Luke says, the fringe of his garment. And then Jesus wants to know what somebody bumped into me. And Peter, he just thinks, well, what do you mean somebody bumped into you? Of course somebody bumped into you. There's all kinds of people around here. He says, no, that I felt power go out of me. Maybe we wonder, what did it feel like when Jesus healed people? What was that experience like? I don't know. You can wonder about that. Jesus says he felt something, and eventually this woman is identified, and she's overwhelmed by the situation, and he commends her faith. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace. So there's there's a connection maybe to what's happening here. Luke, he tells us what she did, and Jesus reacts to her as she has faith. Well, what does it mean that what did she believe? What did she believe, and how did she come to that belief? We probably, at this point, we think, well, Jesus has been doing this sort of thing, so that's why she believes what she has seen and heard, and I wouldn't dispute that for a minute. It is also interesting to note that at the end of Malachi, chapter 4, it talks about the Son, S-U-N, the Son of Righteousness, would arise with healing in his wings. And, without digging too deeply, the wings, the wings of the fringes of the garment, those are the wings of the garment that the leaders would wear. They're fringes. And it's interesting that's what she touches. And when she touches the wings, the fringe, she receives healing. So maybe this woman knew more than we give her credit for knowing. Again, it's at the end of Malachi, chapter 4. You can read about that. But it is it's an interesting detail that Luke points out that's the spot that she touched.
She apparently believed with all her heart that what she did would work.
Mm-hmm.
And her actions were entirely based on faith because she had nothing else to base it on.
Yeah.
So that was, that's why Jesus said your faith has made you well.
Yeah.
Well, it took a lot of courage, too, because, she's probably alienated from society because she was unclean.
Yes.
And everybody was probably afraid of her, and therefore she probably couldn't go and worship with everyone else. She had to stay away from everybody. And then she fought through this crowd to grab him and ask him to heal her.
Yeah. It fits the mold of what Luke is always emphasizing about the outcasts. This woman fits that mold.
Was there any significance to both those stories in the number 12 and the Jews?
And the number 12.
Part of the symbolism that goes along with number 12 and the rest of Scripture in the Old Testament.
Terry's daughter.
Her daughter's 12.
She's 12 and 9.
Two details that are not accidental.
Yeah.
I think all makes kind of lens the story is all pointing back to Testament.
Yeah. I missed that. That's good.
In both cases, though, he's showing his power and authority over uncleanness, being the corpse and the woman of blood. I mean, again, he is teaching everybody else while he is taking care of these two specific unclean things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, going back to the beginning of the chapter of the funeral. Yeah.
I mean, he touched her there in verse, touched her by the hand in verse 54. So, again, he's...
Oh, yeah, you're ahead of me.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. We're going to go there because we've got to keep moving. So, the next scene here, while he's still speaking, someone from the ruler's house comes to him and says, "Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher anymore." that's just a terrible moment. And this is, what else would you expect this servant to say? She's dead, but there's nothing more to do. It's too late. It's too late. And here we see that Luke's showing us that, well, Jesus can deal with the problem of death. We saw it earlier, but we see it again here, where we think that's it. That's the final. There's nothing more to be done. There's nothing more final than death. And what Jesus demonstrates is that, no, He has the final word over death. And tells them, do not fear, only believe, and she will be well. So they go back to the house, and Peter, James, and John, with Jesus, go in with the father and mother to their daughter. They're all weeping and mourning. There in verse 52, Jesus says, do not weep, for she is not dead, but sleeping. Now, of course, that's what a person who's died appears to look like. But we know better. And that's what makes death so difficult, because it just looks like they're sleeping, but they're not. There's nothing you can do. But to Jesus, that's what death is. Death is sleep, and you can wake somebody up who's just asleep, and that's what He does with this girl. Child, arise. 2 words, and her spirit returned, and she got up at once. And He directed that something should be given her to eat. And her parents were amazed. But He charged them to tell no one what had happened. So we're seeing the emphasis of the power of His words, the faith of the people. There seems to be no problem too big that Jesus cannot easily solve.
They ridiculed Him in verse 453. Peter, James, and John, and the parents of the girl, they ridiculed Him, you think?
I don't know what they did. It's like one version says, my version says He laughed. I think the sense is that I don't think it's disrespectful. I think it's almost a nervous thing. There's nothing else you can do here. What are we?
That reminds me of Sarah laughing.
Sarah
You're
laughing.
gonna have a baby, and
Yeah.
no, I'm fine.
Yeah. It's not. Yeah, I don't think it's that they're ridiculing or making fun of him. It's just that they're so beside themselves that there's nothing.
A shock response. Basically.
Yeah, there's nothing else we can do here. And
And I don't think Peter, James, and John were part of the laughing, because they'd already seen Him do it.
yeah, they had seen this earlier in a different case.
Right.
And I don't know if it was the mother and father were laughing either, because it says, except Peter and John and the mother and father of the child, and all were weeping and mourning that were there with the child. Hadn't the mother and father gone out to see Jesus?
Yeah, it seems like one of the accounts said there were mourners,
Mm-hmm.
which were.
That might have been laughing, but I'm not sure that the mother and father
Yeah.
and James were.
Back then, a lot of times mourners were actually hired
Yeah.
to mourn too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the overall sense goes back to the servant who says she's dead. There's no reason for him to come to our house, to come to the house. But there's nothing more to be done.
There's so much emotion in all these stories. If you
Yeah.
think, if you picture in your mind like the people actually acting this out, even the woman with the blood and the parents and just everybody, there's so much heavy emotion in all of it, and Jesus is just calm in the middle of all of it. It's another calm in the middle of the storm, and Jesus is there just reassuring all of them, hey, it's okay, I've got this.
Yeah. Yeah, he's the one who's in complete control, has his wits about him, and knows what he's going to do, and does it. Yeah. It's also interesting that Jesus brings Peter, James, and John. Peter, James, and John. All right, that's going to happen again. He takes Peter, James, and John with him up on the mountain. And we see him, he's got something in mind for Peter, James, and John. Chapter 9, just more progress here in the ministry of Jesus. We need to make progress. So,
David,
go ahead.
just a quick comment. I don't
Yeah.
know, at the end, I heard the comment before, and this is just my best guess. It says that her parents were amazed, but he charged them to tell no one when he told the demon-possessed man. But he was in Gentile territory. Now he's in Jewish territory. So it's a totally different standard in mob situation where, so I'm just guessing that maybe that's the case here.
Yeah, it could be. It could be the difference in perception that the people would have of him. And we haven't seen it lately, but we know there's a conspiracy that's going on in the background with the Jewish leadership to kill him. And so we can understand why he wants to be as discreet as possible, although I don't know if there's anything discreet about raising someone from the dead. But I think you're right. So in chapter 9, the reason I describe it as progress in the ministry of Jesus is because we see he's going to send the 12 out. Right? He chose them. He's been working with them. They've been with him. He's going to send them out and gives them power and authority over all demons and to cure diseases. So he gives them power and authority. He gives these men power and authority. And that becomes important. That's important for us today because Jesus gave authority to the apostles where he didn't give it to anybody else. I guess you can go next door if you want to hear more about that. Thinking about authority, our authority comes from Christ and the apostles, and apostolic authority makes all the difference in how we approach God. But he's going to give them that ability, and we're going to see what they do with that here at the start, and some of the challenges that they have with that. But he sends them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to heal. This is what their lives are going to eventually consist of. Little do they know at this point, but they are mirroring what Jesus is doing. They've had him as their teacher, as their example, and now he gives them the opportunity to take a more leadership role in that. He tells them to take nothing for your journey, no staff, nor bag, nor bread, nor money, and do not have 2 tunics. Whatever house you enter, stay there, and from there depart, and wherever they do not receive you, when you leave that town, shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them. So, number one, there's this ministry sacrifice is going to be involved. Faith is involved here. They're going to encounter rejection. He tells them to shake the dust off their feet against them. Now, it's interesting that they're going into mainly into towns that are made up of the Jews. And the Jews didn't shake the dust off their feet toward other Jews. They did that when they had been in Gentile country. When they came back to Jewish country, they would shake the Gentile dust off their feet, because of the disdain that they had for them. Jesus is saying, no, if anybody won't receive you, that's what you do. People would have known the significance of that cultural statement. So he sends them out, and they get to work, and they're going through all these different villages, preaching the gospel and healing everywhere, Luke says. In 7 to 9, we're told about a little about Herod and how he was perplexed. That's a great word. We haven't heard about Herod in a good while, and he's in the background of all of this, and he's trying to figure it all out, trying to make sense of what's going on, and he doesn't understand what's going on. You get a sense of the perception that people have about Jesus. Some say that John has been raised from the dead. John's been executed. Luke doesn't deal with that. But by this point, he's been executed. Some said that this was Elijah had appeared. Remember, Elijah never died, and so some of the Jews thought perhaps it was him or one of the old prophets who had risen. Herod's reaction: John I beheaded, but who is this about whom I hear such things? And he sought to see it. He wants to see Jesus, which he will later on in a different setting. We'll get there eventually.
This is Antipas. Herod Antipas, right?
Yes. I'm almost positive that we can Google it.
It is. Herod the Great was his father.
Mm-hmm.
This is Herod Antipas.
Okay.
And then after that's Herod the Great.
There you go. Hard to keep the Herods straight.
Didn't we read earlier that there's one of the women that was working with Jesus was
Yes.
married to
Joanna and her husband Chusa. Yeah. They were part of part of the court.
Manager of Herod's household.
Thank you. Manager of Herod's household. All right. Well, now we've got another happening here where Jesus feeds the 5,000. A very familiar account, and what I think stands out here is the purpose of this. You can look at it it serves a couple purposes, right? Jesus demonstrates his compassion, demonstrates his ability to do the impossible, and how he provided for the people. Jesus is able to provide for our needs, to satisfy us. That's all wrapped up here in this. Jesus has more than enough to fill us in our lives, and that's wrapped up in what's going on here. But I think the primary thing that's happening here is Jesus trying to train the apostles, because they're going to participate in all of this. Jesus starts asking them about how are we going to feed these people, and he brings them in to share in this miracle. They don't perform it, but they participate in it, and they are sharing in it unfolding, and it is a faith building exercise. And I think that given the work that they're now starting to do, it would have been very helpful. And there may have been any number of times where Jesus did this sort of thing with them to help teach them about who he was, to test them. Maybe one of them, you're crazy. We're wasting our time trying to feed these people. But that's not the reaction. That's not what they do. They go along with what he tells them, and everyone is filled. Do you have any thoughts about him feeding the 5,000 plus?
It's funny that they've just been out performing miracles themselves, and they come back and they struggle with this simple thing, challenging Jesus. This is like it's beyond us, and it's like you were just out there doing this stuff yourself. Come back and you don't believe in Jesus' ability to feed people.
Yeah, he can raise the dead, but he can't feed a crowd. But I think that's how we are, isn't it? We're kind of that way. We can go through some things, experience some things, and come out the other side, and then later on have moments of doubt, and that's just, I think that's how we are, and certainly is how they were, as they're just trying to understand everything. Anything else?
Number 12 shows up again.
Number 12. Yeah, so let's look. Yeah, 12 baskets.
Well, he's in Jewish territory, right? And that's in Jewish territory.
Yeah.
The other story of the feeding is in Greek or not, like 7 baskets, I think is what it is.
I forget.
How much longer it is, but-
Yeah, number 12. That's good. Good detail, pick up on. And,
I like number 13.
in verse 18, I think we've got time, we can wrap up here with Peter, his confession. First of all, it happened that Jesus was praying alone. Another instance where Luke has Jesus praying. I think there's 16 times in Luke where he writes about Jesus praying. He gives special emphasis to that. The disciples are with him, and he asked them, "Who do the crowd say that I am?" Now, we just saw with Herod. Herod's trying to figure out who he is, and there's a perception, and they give the answer. Some say that John the Baptist, Elijah, and one of the prophets who's of old maybe is risen. Who do you say that I am? Now, those are great questions. Those are very different questions. It's one thing to ask somebody, well, what does everybody else think? And we're usually quick to talk about everybody else. But Jesus doesn't stop there. What do you think? That's something altogether different. Talk about getting put on the spot. What do you think? Who do you think I am? And, truer words have never been spoken, right? With what Peter says. Peter says that you're the Christ of God. That's the way Luke accounts for it, the Christ of God. And we'll see that the importance of that phrase in the couple scenes that follow. So we'll pick up here on Sunday morning. Thank you.
You know what it is? Luke forgot to include the part where Jesus leads.
Yeah, right.
Good job, man.
Yeah.
We got to fight with somebody on the parking lot. Yeah.
Right? 6, 7 sometimes. That's right.
I really like the lucky on demons too.
Oh, good.
When you had a demon, was it you had a demon, and
I think we probably were.
Yeah, but,
Or other than letting them say.
Yeah. No.
I think that's not the first time you say crap.
Yeah.
when they
Yeah.
I'm not saying nothing until Friday, Friday wants to be.
I know. That's right.
Thank you.
And so, anyway, I think just like all of that coming together and then just, of course, just listening to like